Assalamu alaikum students. Today we will discuss about control of breathing or ventilation. In the previous lecture we studied about mechanism of breathing. Student, normally breathing that is not in our control, that is an involuntary process. That's why we are not aware of it. Breathing center that is located in the medulla of the brain, it carries out involuntary control of breathing. Students, medulla is a part of the brain which controls our involuntary actions of the body. This control center that is further divided into two centers. One is called as inspiratory center and other one is called as expiratory center. Inspiratory center that is located at the ventral portion of the breathing center. As it is involved in inspiration, that's why it is called as inspiratory center, while expiratory center that is present at the dorsal and lateral portions of breathing center. It inhibits inspiration and promotes expiration. These two regions, dorsal and lateral, are called as expiratory center. Students, how you have to memorize that, which one is inspiratory and which one is expiratory center? Normally we say that ventral side of the body, that is the inner side, dorsal, that is the top side. Inner means the one which is present at lower in position, not inside. So, inner and inspiration. Inner and inspiration. Ventral side that controls what? That controls inspiration. While dorsal and lateral side, dorsal, as I told you, that is the external side of the body. So external and expiration. Upper side of of our body, that is called as dorsal side, and lower side is called as what? Uh, Ventral side. So external and expiratory, and inner or internal or inspiratory. From this you can memorize it. Now see the diagram. This is human brain. This part is called as medulla. This medulla that is having two portions. This is called as ventral portion. This is called as dorsal portion, and these two, they are called as lateral sides of the medulla. So you can see both these portions, they are controlling mechanism of breathing. Next is role of cerebral cortex. Students, cerebral cortex is also part of brain. Cerebrum, that is part of the brain. It is divided to two hemispheres called as cerebral hemispheres, and outer part of the cerebrum or cerebral hemisphere, that is called as what? Cerebral cortex. So cerebral cortex that controls, that has a conscious control on that of the breathing. As I told you, medulla that that controls involuntarily actions or involuntary actions of the body, while cerebral cortex that controls, uh, uh, that has a conscious control on our breathing. A person may also stop breathing voluntary, and similarly, people, they are able to hold their breath until the blood partial pressure of oxygen declines to a level low enough that they lose consciousness. Means when a person holds its breath, then what happens? A partial pressure of oxygen, it drops, and person that suffers from unconsciousness or loses its consciousness. So then what happens? After consciousness is lost, the respiratory center resume its normal function in automatically controlling respiration. Cerebral cortex that was controlling conscious control of breathing, and when it causes unconsciousness, then medulla that automatically controls process of respiration and means it controls or it brings the body back to its original position. Other than this, emotions acting through the limbic system. Limbic system is also part of the forebrain. It also affects the respiratory center. It also controls or affects our breathing. Students, next topic is transport of gases. The blood, it transports oxygen from the lungs to different tissues and carbon dioxide from tissues to the lungs. Student, transport of these two gases inside the body is mainly done with the help of blood. Now we will discuss transport of both these two gases. One is oxygen and other one is carbon dioxide. Oxygen that is transported with the help of blood, and blood that contains a pigment inside it which is called as hemoglobin. The word hemo means blood and globin means protein. So a blood protein called as hemoglobin that is mainly involved in the transport of oxygen. This hemoglobin that is present in red blood cells or red blood corpuscles, and hemoglobin combines with oxygen at high partial pressure. Means, in lungs, oxygen partial pressure that is higher as compared to the blood, or in alveoli partial pressure that is higher. So when oxygen it combines with hemoglobin, it forms bright red oxyhemoglobin. Next is 97% of oxygen that is carried by the red blood cells as oxyhemoglobin, while 3% is transported as dissolved oxygen in the plasma. At, as I told you earlier, at high partial pressure of oxygen, oxygen binds with hemoglobin. This binding is a reversible reaction, means when partial pressure of oxygen it gets low, which occurs at the level of tissues, then hemoglobin, oxyhemoglobin, it dissociates oxygen from it, and again it provides that oxygen to the tissues, and again it gets changed into what? Into hemoglobin. And this whole process that is carried out with the help of enzyme called as carbonic anhydrase. Next, how many molecules they can be carried by one molecule of hemoglobin? 4 oxygen molecules they can be carried by one molecule of hemoglobin. You can see from the equation, hemoglobin plus 4 oxygen molecules in the presence of carbonic anhydrase enzyme, it gets changed into what? Into oxyhemoglobin, or you can write it in this form, HbO8. The ability of hemoglobin to bind with oxygen is called as oxygen carrying capacity of blood. Next, with the help of figure, you can see these are oxygen molecules, oxygen atoms. They are combining it with the red blood cells, and in this way it is carrying it to that of the tissues, and at the level of tissues it will dissociate back into oxygen and hemoglobin. Next is transport of carbon dioxide. Transport of carbon dioxide that is carried in three main ways. One is in the form of bicarbonate ions, second is in the form of carboxyhemoglobin, and third one, it is transported in dissolved form inside the plasma. Students, previously we said that there are two ways to transport oxygen. One is through hemoglobin, and other one is in dissolved form inside the plasma. 97% of oxygen that is transported in through red blood corpuscles, and 3% that is transported in through plasma. Next is, now I will explain these three ways one by one. First, how carbon dioxide that is transported as bicarbonate ions. Students, approximately 70% of carbon dioxide is carried in the blood as bicarbonate ions. Carbon dioxide from the tissues that enters into the blood vessel, and inside the blood vessel, it combines with it enters into the red blood cells, and inside the red blood cells, it combines with water in the presence of an enzyme called as carbonic anhydrase, and it gets changed into what? Into carbonic acid. But this carbonic acid is an unstable compound, so it dissociates into carbon dioxide, into hydrogen and bicarbonate ions soon. So then state of dissociation of carbonic acid. Students, as I told you earlier, that carbonic acid, that is an unstable compound and dissociates to form hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. So what would be the fate of hydrogen ions produced as a result of carbonic acid dissociation? Accumulation of hydrogen ions increases acidity in the blood, and it leads to the decrease in pH, and when pH it drops, a person it can become unconscious. So how hydrogen ions which are produced as a result of carbonic acid dissociation, they are dealt inside the blood. So these hydrogen ions, they soon combine with oxyhemoglobin, and as a result, oxyhemoglobin that dissociates its oxygen and gets changed into hemoglobinic acid. It happens, or it occurs at the level of tissues, means it releases oxygen to the tissues, and it itself it gets changed into what? Into hemoglobinic acid. Next is fate of bicarbonate ions, means as I told you, as a result of dissociation of carbonic acid, hydrogen and bicarbonate ions, they are produced. So hydrogen, it combines with oxyhemoglobin, while bicarbonate ions, they move out into the plasma, means from red blood cells, they diffuse out into that of the plasma, while to maintain the balance of ions on either side, chloride ions, they move from the plasma into that of the red blood cells, or in the opposite direction. This is achieved by special proteins present in the membrane of red blood cells called as bicarbonate chloride carrier proteins, because they are involved in the transport of bicarbonate as well as chloride ions. So with that reference, we call them bicarbonate chloride carrier proteins. So in this way, they maintain balance of ions on either side. This phenomenon is called as Hamburger's phenomenon or chloride shift. Next, chloride ions which enter into the red blood cells and bicarbonate ions which enter into the plasma, what happened to them? The chloride ions that enter the red blood cells combine with potassium to form potassium chloride, whereas bicarbonate ions in the blood plasma combine with sodium to form sodium bicarbonate. Student, in this way, blood pH that is maintained at about 7.4. Now, with the help of figure, I can explain it. This is a diagram showing at the tissue level exchange of gases, and this is gas exchange at lungs or alveoli. So from the cells, carbon dioxide that is entering into the red blood cell, carbon dioxide it will enter into the blood vessel, and inside the blood vessel it will enter into the red blood cells. This carbon dioxide inside the red blood cells combine with water in the presence of carbonic anhydrase enzyme, and it gets changed into what? Into carbonic acid. Carbonic acid that will dissociate into hydrogen and bicarbonate ions. These hydrogen ions, they will combine with oxyhemoglobin to form what? To form hemoglobinic acid, and oxygen that will dissociate, and this oxygen that will enter into the tissue. Now, what will happen with the bicarbonate ions? Bicarbonate ions, they will move out into the plasma. This pale color is showing plasma, and these are red blood cells. While chloride ions, they will enter into that of the red blood cell, and I told you this will occur with the help of special proteins present in the membrane of red blood cells called as bicarbonate chloride carrier proteins. Now, what what will happen with these bicarbonate ions at the level of lungs or alveoli. Over there, chloride ions, they will move out from the red blood cells, while bicarbonate ions, they will move back into that of the red blood cell. And hemoglobinic acid, it will dissociate hydrogen as at the level of lungs, oxygen level or oxygen partial pressure that is higher. So this hemoglobin that will combine with oxygen to form again oxyhemoglobin, and hydrogen that will combine with bicarbonate ions to form carbonic acid. This carbonic acid that will dissociate into water and carbon dioxide in the presence of enzyme carbonic anhydrase, and this carbon dioxide that will move into that of the alveoli, from where it can be exhaled out. It can be exhaled. Okay, and a student, carbon dioxide, as I told you earlier, it can move or it can be transported in the form of carboxyhemoglobin as well. So carbon dioxide from the tissues that will enter into that of the blood vessel. Over there, it will enter into the red blood cell, and inside the red blood cell, hemoglobin that is present, so it will combine with that, and it will get changed into carboxyhemoglobin. This carboxyhemoglobin at the level of lungs, it will dissociate into hemoglobin and carbon dioxide that will diffuse out. While carbon dioxide which is present at the level of tissues, some of it that can be transported in the form of dissolved plasma. So carbon dioxide that will directly diffuse into that of the plasma, and then plasma, it will dissociate this carbon dioxide at the level of lungs, and in this way it will move out from the alveoli during exhalation. Now, this is all about how carbon dioxide that is moving through hemoglobin. Percentage of carbon dioxide that is transported through hemoglobin, that is 23%. Student, the rest of the process I already explained to you, but keep this thing in your mind that when partial pressure of carbon dioxide that is higher in the blood than tissues, as in the case of lungs, then carboxyhemoglobin releases its carbon dioxide. But when its level that is uh, low, that is, sorry, carbon dioxide level that is higher in the tissues than blood, then formation of carboxyhemoglobin that occurs. Next is, as dissolved plasma, only 7% of carbon dioxide is carried out in this way. This is rather inefficient way to carry carbon dioxide, but it does occur. This is the last one slide, that is your homework. Student, you have to attempt these three questions in your neat notebooks. Which factor increases the ability of oxygen binding to hemoglobin? What is the Hamburger's phenomenon? And name the centers of medulla which control breathing. Thank you, students.